Good. Kevin. Okay. Good to go? Okay, thank you all for joining us. Can I just do a quick audience check? Can you all hear clearly? Yeah, great. And the panel can all hear? We may need headphones. All right. Okay, well, thank you all for joining us. We have a lot to get through in 45 minutes or 40 minutes now. My name is Sian Bradley. I'm the head of the Secretariat for the Beyond Oil and Gas Alliance. And we're honoured to be co-hosting today's event with the European Commission here at the Portugal Pavilion. There's probably never been a more important moment to be talking about how we raise ambition on an orderly, just and equitable transition away from fossil fuels, and how we start moving from ambition to action. And I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by an esteemed panel here today, including who you'll see to my right, including Jules Jorgensen, the Director General for the Energy Directorate of the European Commission, who will be joining us in just a moment. Eamon Ryan, Minister for Environment, Climate and Communication, and Minister for Transport, Ireland. Laura Remelson, Director General, Ministry of Climate Change, Estonia. Mark Bowman, Vice President for Policy and Partnerships from the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. Alice Amorim, Head of the Extraordinary Office for COP30 of the National Secretariat for Climate Change, Brazil. And finally, Kevin Magron, Climate Ambassador, France. So we have an incredible discussion, lots of viewpoints from the EU and much further afield. And we want to use today to really set out what translating this ambition on the global transition looks like, and the actions that we each collectively are taking, and what collaboration to drive this global goal forwards looks like. So with that said, welcome Minister Ryan. I'll turn the floor to you.
Thank you, and good morning everyone. I hope you can hear me. I've just come from this morning the Higher Ambition Coalition meeting, and I thought maybe just reflect on a couple of things I heard there as to where we are in this COP. One of the main points being discussed was what was agreed last year has to be held up to. Last year was not a menu of whatever you're having yourself as we transition away from fossil fuels. It was a clear commitment. We have to transition. We know this as a scientific reality. And I just thought to reflect that is important. And I suppose particularly because, well, we live in difficult times. There is this question about, what was you could have quoted yesterday about the fossil fuels being God-given. But maybe I might quote an alternative. Bill McKibben, I think he said, we have to use the power that comes from the heavens, not the energy that would bring us into hell. And those power from the heavens, that solar power and the wind systems, it seems to me are going to be the key direction where we need to go. Or similarly, I suppose, again, if you look at US election, you can't ignore the reality that drill seems to have won the day. But that can't stop this process. There can't be a veto where we all have to stop because in one country there's a political direction towards fossil fuels. We know that there are more than enough fossil fuels to burn this planet forever and a day, but we have to, again, going back to Bill McKibben, that line from 15, 20 years ago, we have to keep them in the ground for everyone's sake. I might want to maybe just to give an example from a very local perspective, Europe in my case, Ireland more specifically. and just reflect on two of the other meetings we've had recently in Europe. We had our own Energy Council meeting. Deet will be here shortly to discuss it, and we asked ourselves the question, can Europe really be competitive as we decarbonize? You know, in this world, when we see really cheap fossil fuel in the States, their price of gas is a fraction of what we have. Is this decarbonization going to get in the way with our competitiveness? And we came to the conclusion that doesn't take that long to come to, that we don't have a choice. We're not going to be competitive at burning fossil fuels. And in truth, if we really advance, the other risk from a European perspective is the cheaper, cleaner technologies may all come from China. They have a step ahead in the likes of electric vehicles, batteries, solar power, and so on. In my mind, because politically 10, 15, 20 years ago, for a variety of reasons, they set that course. So for Europe, as one of the markets, and we have to make sure every market, every continent is part of this transition, we can only go one way for our competitiveness, and that is away from the use of fossil fuels. And I think those continents or those countries which do that in a more medium-term horizon may then have an advantage over those who stay and delay, because we're all at risk, and the imperative of keeping fossil fuel in the ground will be the same for every single country. In terms of, so that came out of our Energy Council meeting. There was one other meeting we had, maybe just to refer to. It was in Denmark, and it was the North Seas Energy Cooperation. We meet together on a regional basis, Northwest Europe, to think about the mechanics of how do we switch to this alternative, not fossil fuels. And there it's all about interconnection. It's all about the electrification of everything. It's all about cooperation. Now we have our ongoing rows about whether that means nuclear or renewables. We're going to have to resolve that, in my mind, where we integrate our market in any case. But that system of using HVDC cable technology, where you can ship power over a long distance, is in my mind the technological innovation that may allow us all to make the leap, to balance renewables, particularly over long distances. And I think that investment, that technology, that certainty of the alternative to the fossils is an important part of BOGA as well, showing that what the better alternative is. And it's there. United Kingdom yesterday, Ofgem made a decision in favour of interconnection, which for Ireland, the island on the other side of the island in Europe, is going to give us a vital link. But I think it can work in so many different areas. It can, and it works particularly between countries. It's based on trust. And that's what these negotiations need more than anything else, for us to build trust in the electrified alternative future, which is going to be the better economy, because it's the only safe economy for us all. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Minister. Dieter, if I can turn to you, especially for the Commission's role in this and the importance of EU leadership on this agenda.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Minister Eamon. Pleasure to see you all. And my apologies for being so late to this important event. I was coming from another event that is highly relevant to the work of BOGA and highly relevant to the transitioning away from fossil fuels. I was moderating a leaders' meeting with the UN Secretary General on advancing the recommendations of his panel on critical energy transition minerals. I was one of two co-chairs, and I think it's a good example of how the energy systems change, how the value chains change, what are the challenges ahead of us, but also the opportunities. So just a brief word specifically on the critical energy transition minerals, which is a necessary component of renewable energy, of energy storage, of all the green technologies that are needed in our transitioning away from fossil fuels, and where we have an opportunity to build better value chains, more trust, as you were saying, Minister, more justice and equity, and creating opportunities for growth and development, also in resource-rich developing countries that have not yet drawn the benefit. So a good introduction to what we are discussing here. Now, COP28 brought really a historic breakthrough in agreeing to triple renewable energy deployment by 2030, to double energy efficiency improvements by 2030, with a view to transitioning away from fossil fuels. And so the work of BOGA, our partnership in BOGA, where we as a European Commission is really glad to be part of that discussion and part of that partnership, is really a necessity for staying on track of Paris, bringing us back on track for Paris, and making the changes that are needed. Within the European Union, we have put in place a strong and ambitious regulatory framework to ensure that we do what we need to do with renewables, energy efficiency. We've put in place a regulation on methane emissions linked to the energy sector, so that while we still have fossil in our system, we take the action that is needed. Now, I think we have shared challenges globally, in the sense that we need significantly increased investment to go into the transition, and we need to make sure that we do the transition in the best possible way to draw the benefits, both in terms of climate, environment, but also in terms of competitiveness, growth, trade, investment, and the security, the energy security, because from a European Union perspective, again, our reliance on fossil imports has been a significant risk to our energy security. So we are looking to build stronger partnerships, clean trade investment partnerships, and work together with partners on all the different aspects of the new value chain of energy as we transition away from fossil fuels. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you, Dita. So I think really clear messages on the imperative, the long-term direction of travel here, and how that managed transition away from fossil fuels is absolutely crucial, not only to climate security, but to our energy and economic security in the longer term. And on the importance of partnership. And we have a range of perspectives on the panel, and I want to turn to each of you for 2 minutes or so of opening reflections, and then we can open the discussion and speak with the audience as well. Laura, maybe if I can turn to you first for Estonia's perspective. Thank you.
Thank you. And good afternoon to everybody. Estonia is currently in interesting place after the previous COP, when it was agreed to move away from fossil fuel. We started our national discussions on our climate law that will also set the timeline for phasing out fossil fuels. Those have been heavy discussions with various stakeholders, and what we have understood and what we therefore have taken on board with developing our concrete plan in terms of phasing out fossil fuels is that it's not anymore only about setting an ambition in terms of greenhouse gas emission reduction or phasing out from something, but what are the concrete steps, how to reshape the economy, that we don't only ban or restrict, but we provide replacements in terms of industrial productions, in terms of new cleaner economy. And therefore I guess that our approach on climate law is not common. So in a way that we don't just set ambition, but we have really merged and combined our climate targets with economic activities, initiatives in terms of how do we carry out public procurements. What are concrete terms for public sector to carry out assessments in terms of fossil fuel subsidies, and how to incorporate it into their decision making, how to issue permits for our natural resources, how to foster development and uptake of green technologies. We see that the public sector has really important role in it, because public sector is a great consumer. It sets an example, and the way public sector is targeting or using its resources has eventually effect on private sector, on our companies, because what they need a guarantee, they need investment security, and they need that those new technologies have a market. So it is really important to think through all the steps, and I must say that we have now a draft plan. What are the main steps need to be made? First of all, to decrease greenhouse gas emissions, but also how to eventually step away from fossil fuels. And of course, together with it, it means concrete steps also for our industry development and also for our energy sector. And therefore, when developing our climate law, we also take careful look at those policies as well and have planned concrete steps there as well. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you, Laura. And I think as a significant oil shale producer within the EU, I mean, Estonia is demonstrating real leadership in the way it's approaching these questions. And we look forward to seeing the passage of the Climate Act. Obviously, this is a huge challenge within the European Union. It's also a challenge beyond. And the EU development and trade architecture has a crucial role to play in supporting just transitions. And EBRD has been at the forefront of much of the MDB just transition work. Mark, if I can hand to you.
Well, thank you very much, and real pleasure to be here. And let me just talk very briefly about the EBRD experience, and actually just to pick up where the minister, where Eamon started talking about competitiveness, because speaking from our experience, the countries where we operate in Eastern Europe, Central Asia, North Africa, we have a realization that renewable energy makes sense not just from a climate perspective, but also from an economic perspective and from an energy security perspective. And if we've learned anything in the last few years, it's that fossil fuels are not only dirty, but they're expensive and can be very unreliable. So we see an increasing number of our countries that previously might not have been making quick progress on renewable energy, showing that interest now, taking action, and also an increasing realization more broadly amongst countries that in order to remain competitive, they need to take climate issues seriously. So I think that's in a world where multilateral cooperation may be challenging, that's a very kind of positive dynamic. The transition from fossil fuels, it's complex. There are key issues around finance and the finance need, but it's not just about finance. It's about a kind of variety of different issues. It's about countries having the political ambition. It's about them having a comprehensive plan. It's about investments in the grid. It's about the regulatory environment. It's about macroeconomic environments, etc., etc. It's about dealing with vested interests. It's about all of these issues. So fundamentally, in any particular country, it's a political economy challenge, kind of very, very multi-dimensional. And this comes on to our approach and how we work in partnership. And it's very important that countries have a comprehensive plan, and that the international community, the MDBs, donors, work to support that plan. There's a lot of discussion about country platforms. They are the right idea. It's a bit, the debate can get a bit into the jargon, but fundamentally, a country needs to have a comprehensive plan for its energy transition, and the MDBs and donors need to work together to support that plan. And that's been our experience in recent years. We've been very pleased at COP last year to support North Macedonia with its energy transition investment platform, advancing the rollout of renewable energy commitments to phase out coal. The year before at COP27 we supported Egypt with its NOEFI program, a commitment to retire 5 gigawatts of inefficient gas energy and build out 10 gigawatts of renewable energy. And to go back to my starting point, it just makes sense from all dimensions in terms of giving Egypt access to cheaper renewable energy, secure renewable energy, and being able to export gas to other markets. So makes complete economic and financial sense. So the fundamental kind of positive signs of technological advances, meaning that renewable energy makes sense, the need for countries to have a kind of comprehensive plan in order to roll it out, to deal with all the investment in the grid, the regulatory issues, the just transition angles, and the fundamental need for the international community, the MDBs and donors to work together to support those countries.
Amazing, thank you, Mark. And we'll be continuing discussions on country platforms and support for just transitions at the MDB Pavilion on Friday morning with our MDB partners, for those of you who want to join us there. Kevin, I'm aware you have to run off fairly soon, so we're going to skip the order and come to you, and then we'll revert to Mina and then Alice.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for Portugal for hosting us today. It's a real delight to be here. I mean, we love BOGA, as you know. We push as much as we can in BOGA. There's a simple thinking behind it. I mean, we really believe that the intensive extraction and drill politics is a vision of the past, basically. And BOGA addresses the world of tomorrow. And that's why we want to be part of it, and we want to push it. And I really welcome this new partnership with the European Commission and BOGA. I think it's great to have you here, Dieter. You're a real leader, and we need Europe as a first carbon-free continent, hopefully very soon in this coalition. Listen, I think I said it already a couple of times this morning, but I think what we negotiated last year at COP28 will be only as good as its implementation will be. And for the time being, it's a piece of paper. So to make sure that the UAE Consensus and this historic deal that we all think we have closed in last year is a real thing, we need to embed it, to have an embedded politics inside our NDCs for the phasing out of fossil fuels. So at national level, what do we do? I mean, in France, we're trying our best, and we will be closing our last 2 coal plants in 2027. But next to that, we want to phase out oil by 2045 and gas by 2050. This process will go hand-to-hand with renewable energy deployment, of course, and the aim is to increase solar energy production capacity tenfold by 2050. And I think it has obviously major implications in terms of competition, what we're doing here, and in terms of trade relations between the country and cooperation. So that will not work if we first don't invest massively in the clean energy economy, and this is what we'll do in the EU and in France as well. It means industrial politics, a very industrial strategy, ambitious and with a lot of investment. But it needs also, in terms of dialogue, a lot more cooperation with other countries. I mean, producing countries will tell you, well, you have to act on the demand. And I think we have to send clear signals from big consumers to producing states that we want to continue cooperate and dialogue with them. But in our NDC, we will reflect with national policies, planning, and clear calendar of phasing out our ambition to be net zero. So beside that, obviously, we will need to strengthen our financing politics through the JETPs and other such programs. And I think BOGA has established a fund. It's a great beginning. We need to work more with producing states and those who are most in need to transition away from fossil fuel. And I think we need more countries around the table also. So I would appreciate if everybody also tries to help us in bringing more people for BOGA to become stronger. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kevin. And Kevin, you've just touched upon a core part of our collaboration with the Commission, which is, of course, supporting producer-consumer dialogue. This is very much a discussion about empowering producers and making sure that the information, the policy approaches, the tools, the instruments are there and in place, and that governments have the confidence to move forward with transition planning. Marcelo, maybe if I can turn to you next. This is, of course, a question of cleaning up the sector while also planning for that longer-term transition and phase-out. Yeah.
Great, thanks. So I'm from the Methane Hub, and we work on mitigating methane in the oil and gas sector, of course, and the coal sector, along with waste and ag. The important thing here is to divide the world between those who import fossil fuels and those who produce. It's inevitable that the demand will go down given the e-mobility, and that's what the IEA has shown. This, we saw a global carbon budget today being published. Of course, emissions continue to rise, but there's one thing that's important. China emissions may have peaked, and it has to do with the lower demand due to the e-mobility that's irreversible. So I think it's important that we understand that. When I was at the World Bank, I led the team that did the Beyond Stranded Assets report that indicated the fiscal risk for countries to depend on the income of fossil fuels. But on the other side, being from Chile, I also saw the risk of the fossil fuel subsidy demand because of the volatility that fossil fuel prices bring. And that's really difficult because it brings inflation and it puts priorities where they shouldn't be. And I think that's really important to bring because countries that import fossil fuels are tired of that volatility and the inflation that it brings. And so therefore, when we chose to phase out coal, it was a good choice because the 30% roughly renewable energy from wind and solar that we had helped protect our economy from that rising price. And this is really important. This happens also with the e-mobility agenda that we've been able to push. So the public transportation system did not depend fully on the diesel price, and we had an isolated signal that it's increasing. So we need to understand this in the context of economic stability overall. As the hub itself, we understand that this transition, as we shut down coal, for example, in Chile, going to natural gas would be one consideration. Current leakage rates make that very questionable because if you look at the full methane emissions in the power generation with natural gas, emissions may be worse than coal. And so therefore, it's really important the signal that the EU is bringing by establishing those import standards. They themselves could shift and reduce oil and gas sector emissions by 30% on methane if fully exerted. And we as a hub are supporting IMEO, the satellites, to make that be a success. But also helping producers to be prepared for this transition, to understand how to reduce those emissions. And I think that's really important. But my main signal is the phase out of fossil fuel makes economic sense to not be always going towards the economic instability of lower fiscal revenue when you're a fossil fuel producer and having to spend on fossil fuel subsidies when you're an importer.
Brilliant. Thank you, Marcelo. And last but certainly not least, moving on to Alice. Obviously, the incoming Brazilian presidency is key to advancing many of these issues, that EU-Brazilian partnership. Over to you.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here with you. The more we start to think in Brazil about the symbolic element of COP30, we started by thinking, okay, is this going to be the COP of the forests? It's going to be the COP of the indigenous communities? Or will that be the COP of just transition? These are actually open questions that we have been asking ourselves and trying to pave that way in the way we frame our presidency next year. But one of the key elements of this framing is that the transitioning away is here. It's a commitment of us all, and we want to take this from commitments to implementation. For a lot of people, maybe not for this audience, people tend to imagine that the climate conversation or the mitigation conversation in Brazil, it's all about deforestation. It is. There naturally is the conversation of today, and it's the conversation of the past, but it's not the conversation of the future. And an example of that is that just in 1 year, Brazil already managed to reduce more than 40% of its deforestation rates. So this political signal and this action, hard action on the ground, is actually providing a big open space for us to discuss transition, different transitions. And it's very interesting to see that we are going to have this COP in Brazil, in a country that has one of the most renewable energy matrices in the world. So the commitment on tripling renewables is not something that it's a significant challenge for Brazil necessarily. It's a country that has a strong history of biofuels, technology investments, and so on. It's also a country that is actually on the edge of discussing SAF, other kinds of innovations that come with the transition. So I think to deliver this, President Lula is, as you may have seen at the UNGA, is actually deeply committed to this, and we need to have cooperation. We need to have South-South cooperation, we need to have North-South cooperation to deliver the paragraph 28 and a very concrete and strong roadmap to make this in a just way and also in a meaningful way for countries that still need to face development issues such as Brazil, Latin America, and several other countries. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you, Alice. So we have just a few minutes left, and I do want to just take one or two questions and have a bit of a discussion before we wrap up. So if I can just check a show of hands for questions. Let's take these two here, and that might be enough for the next 5 minutes. Julia, if you can kick us off. Oh.
Thank you, Didier. Excellent. Well, thank you so much. I'm Julia Panzer with the Energy Transition Fund. Congratulations, first of all. I was reflecting this morning when I came in on like, has the conversation, where are we? Has the conversation changed from, say, 10 years ago? And, well, you show that, yes, it has. So thank you for that. So my question is maybe towards the EU, but also Brazil, on how are you thinking to collaborate with different member states on their NDCs to ensure that we see the energy transition package, but also specifically the transition away from fossil fuels, which we know is difficult, reflected in the NDCs. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you, Juliet. Okay, that's a very big question, and we've got 4 minutes left. So maybe we hold it there, and we'll come to you, hang around afterwards. We can speak after. Panel, or Dieter, maybe if we start with you, and then if anyone else wants to add a few comments.
Well, thank you very much, also for the good question. And thank you very much to you, Alice, and Brazil for the leadership in G20 and towards COP30 next year. We really, from the side of the European Union, look forward to working very, very closely with you in partnership to bring the best possible result at COP30 as part of this continuous process. And I think you've put it very, very precisely that we need to lift paragraph 28 from paper to reality. We need to make that transitioning away from fossil fuels happen. We know it is, of course, a challenge for countries that are dependent on exports and extraction of fossil energy, and therefore that partnership between producing countries and consuming countries is a critical one to help make things happen. I think we as a European Union, as a net importer of energy and of fossil energy as well, we have a particular role and responsibility to engage in that partnership, also in helping countries make good use of their NDCs, again to lift paragraph 28 from paper and into their policy work. So I think global partnerships, cooperation, and again remaining on track and keeping our focus on what we have agreed to do, so that we make it happen, including in our partnership with BOGA and partners. Thank you.
Alice, please come
Great. No, I think it's an excellent question, Julia, because one of the key expectations we see around Brazil is that, okay, what's going to be our NDC diplomacy efforts and how much can we actually effectively leverage the capacity of other countries to deliver on time? Actually, we are very much committed to seize this momentum, especially in the next 3 or 4 months, to make sure that other countries deliver. But we do need the contributions from civil society in different countries to make that actually a nationally driven process. Because in the end of the day, the NDCs, they need to match the domestic politics with the domestic processes and also the country platform. So I think the example that we have just experienced, and hopefully next week we're going to see the results of the G20 reinforcing the efforts of the Task Force Climate and the country platforms as an actionable instrument to drive implementation even before the NDCs are there, because we need to match these two elements, the financing structure, the business engagement, and actually the policy framework at the domestic level. So we are also actually have been the presidents of the BRICS next year. So we are eager to work on that platform as well, to use this as a convergence element towards more ambitious NDCs. Thank you.
Thank you, Alice. And Minister, did you want to? Mark, please come in.
I just wanted to add a very quick comment that countries setting out ambitious NDCs is often seen as an obligation on countries. It's also an opportunity. Countries that set out a high level of climate ambition will do better in terms of attracting investment. I think that's a very important point that needs to be remembered.
Thank you, Mark. Right, we've got a couple of minutes. If we can just take this one last question and then we'll wrap up.
Hi, thanks for this very interesting.
You can introduce yourself as well.
Hi, my name is Paul. I work for an NGO called Lingo. Thanks for this very interesting panel. I was wondering if Europe goes to global south countries and asks them to leave fossil fuel in the ground, may be seen as hypocritical for two reasons, because Europe is still granting new oil and gas licenses, and Europe has benefited from oil and gas extraction for more than 200 years. So I was wondering if you find a way to leave fossil fuel in the ground while addressing the needs for social and economic development in those countries. Thanks.
I think we do have to be very careful. And the hardest issue I've met in recent years is you might come across a minister from a developing country and they've just discovered significant oil and gas reserves, and we're saying, oh, sorry, you're too late. You have to keep in the ground. So we do need some sort of mechanism that we support, and how that's done is quite complicated, but it's something we're going to have to look at. But I can only speak for our own country. We have stopped oil and gas exploration. Our sea area is much bigger than our land area, so it's the Northeast Atlantic, but we don't do that anymore. We have stopped. And I do think BOGA has had an important role in that, because that's what we need to do, and our country has made that development, and we're not alone. Denmark has done that. The United Kingdom only announced it last week, so countries are starting to move in that direction of committing not to explore. That has to be the first thing we do.
If I may add just one comment, I agree with everything Eamon, the Irish Minister, has said. In Europe, countries are moving away from that, and I think it's also important to distinguish, to clarify that relying on fossil extraction is not a reliable, it is not a sustainable economic model. So in terms of the development and opportunities of countries that are resource rich, whether that is fossil resource rich or mineral resource rich, there are better economic models, more opportunities for growth and development and for a just transition. And so if I may come back to my starting point when I joined the panel here today, critical energy transition, minerals and resource-rich developing countries, but also countries that are in the neighborhoods. If we can help them grow their economies, if we can help value addition, value chains, manufacturing in those countries. So beyond the focus on raw materials, whether that is fossil materials or other materials, and help build global value chains. It's better for the global resilience, it's better for the climate, it's better for growth globally, not just in Europe or in other countries that may have relied on fossil in the past. But it is not about us asking this to end. It is about the fact that fossil extraction is not a good economic model. So let's create other opportunities and help facilitate that shift. Thank you.
Amazing. So on that note, I know that all of our panel have other engagements to run to. Thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you all for sharing your thoughts and experience and your messages, and of course, Portugal for hosting us. If you want to learn more about the BOGA Commission partnership, there will be a press release on the website later today, on the Commission website. We'll be sharing that online. And yeah, please let's continue this discussion and continue these messages and this energy through the next 2 weeks. Thank you.